A ruthless billionaire left his sick black twin daughters to die in the mountains. They were 5 years old. Their hearts were failing. The medical bills were drowning him, and together they were worth 4 million dead. He drove away without looking back. What he didn't know was that a shadow watched from behind the pines, a man who'd been paid to make sure those children never came home. But 18 years later, the lights glittered across the Anderson Global Summit. Cameras erupted, donors applauded, champagne towers sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Robert Anderson stood at the podium, beaming for the press, accepting an award for his children's medical fund, the foundation built on his daughters' deaths. The $4 million he collected when they supposedly died had become $4 billion. His empire, his legacy, his unblemished name. Tonight, he was invincible. Tonight, he had no idea that the twin daughters he'd abandoned were standing 30 feet apart in the crowd. They'd changed their names, infiltrated his inner circle, documented every crime, traced every cover-up. And in 7 days, they would lead him back to those mountains, back to the exact clearing where he'd left them crawling and screaming. What happened there destroyed everything he'd become. And it all started with 2 red cardigans he thought he'd buried forever. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments and what time it is right there. Then don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support the work we do here. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. Jeanette noticed the quiet first. No engine hum, no radio. Just wind scraping through branches and her own breathing, which didn't sound right. Too quick, too wet. She clutched the sleeve of her red cardigan. The fabric felt damp against her burning skin. Beside her, Jeanelle hadn't spoken in hours. She was bent forward, palms pressed to the dirt, mouth open, trying to pull air into lungs that wouldn't cooperate. Her matching red cardigan hung loose on her shoulders. "Daddy." He stood several feet ahead on the narrow mountain trail, back turned. His suit was too clean for a place this empty, too expensive for a man who claimed he had nothing left. His hands were in his pockets. He didn't answer. Jeanette noticed the quiet first. No engine hum, no radio, just wind scraping through branches and her own breathing, which didn't sound right. Too quick, too wet. She clutched the sleeve of her red cardigan. The fabric felt damp against her burning skin. Beside her, Jeanelle hadn't spoken in hours. She was bent forward, palms pressed to the dirt, mouth open, trying to pull air into lungs that wouldn't cooperate. Her matching red cardigan hung loose on her shoulders. "Daddy." He stood several feet ahead on the narrow mountain trail, back turned. His suit was too clean for a place this empty, too expensive for a man who claimed he had nothing left. His hands were in his pockets. He didn't answer. Jeanelle tried next, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, please." Robert Anderson's shoulders tensed. For half a second, Jeanette thought he might turn around. She reached out with one small hand, fingers stretching toward him through the cold air. He took a step forward, away. "Wait." Jeanette's voice cracked. Her chest felt tight, like something was squeezing her ribs from the inside. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold. She dropped to her knees, then to her hands. The ground was cold and rough, with pine needles and broken leaves. Jeanelle was already crawling. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each one harder than the last. She dragged herself forward, one hand over the other, red cardigan trailing in the dirt behind her. "Daddy, don't leave us." Robert's pace quickened. His polished shoes crunched against the trail, moving steadily away from the 2 small voices calling after him. Jeanette crawled faster, ignoring the pain radiating through her chest. She could see the back of his jacket, the way his shoulders stayed straight, unbothered. She screamed his name this time, raw and desperate, the sound tearing out of her throat. Jeanelle screamed too, a broken wail that echoed through the empty woods. Robert didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He didn't look back. The twins crawled side by side now, their red cardigans bright against the brown earth, their hands clawing at dirt and roots and anything that might pull them closer to the man walking away. They reached for him with outstretched arms, voices hoarse, bodies shaking. But he was already gone. The forest swallowed his footsteps. The silence returned, heavier than before, and two little girls lay gasping on the cold mountain floor, abandoned. Marcus Webb had been following Robert Anderson's car for 40 minutes, keeping 3 bends back on the winding mountain road. He'd done this kind of work before. Cleanup jobs, erasures, problems that needed to disappear quietly. The envelope in his glove compartment held $15,000 in cash, half now, half when it was confirmed. Robert's car had stopped 20 minutes ago, then left. Marcus waited another 10 before he moved. He found them by the sound. 2 voices, thin and desperate, calling for someone who wasn't there anymore. Marcus stepped off the trail and pushed through the underbrush, following the cries until he saw them. 2 little girls in matching red cardigans collapsed on the forest floor. They were supposed to be dead already, or close enough. He stood there frozen, watching them struggle to breathe. They hadn't noticed him yet. Their eyes were fixed on the empty trail where their father had disappeared, still reaching, still hoping. Marcus had rules, no kids, no witnesses who couldn't fight back. But the money was already spent, his daughter's tuition, the back rent, the medical bills stacking up on his kitchen counter. And Robert Anderson didn't make requests. He made arrangements. Jeanette turned her head, her eyes locked onto him. "Help us," she whispered. Marcus's hand moved to his jacket pocket, where the syringe waited. 2 doses, fast-acting, painless. That was the deal. Make sure it ends. No suffering, no evidence, no loose threads. Jeanelle coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Marcus flinch. She tried to sit up and couldn't. He thought about his own daughter, 8 years old, same dark eyes, same trust that adults would do the right thing. "Please," Jeanette said again. Marcus pulled his hand out of his pocket. Empty. He knelt beside them, checking pulses, breath rates, skin temperature. Both girls were burning up, hearts racing erratically. They needed a hospital. They needed it an hour ago. "Can you walk?" he asked. They shook their heads. Marcus looked back toward the trail, toward his car, toward the decision that would change everything. If he left them here, Robert would never know the difference. If he saved them, Robert would hunt them forever, unless Robert thought they were dead. Marcus scooped Jeanette into his arms first, then came back for Jeanelle. They were lighter than they should have been, fragile and feverish. He carried them to his car one at a time, laying them across the back seat, wrapping them in the emergency blankets from his trunk. He took one of the syringes and emptied it into the dirt, took a photo of the empty forest floor, sent it to the number that had hired him with 3 words, "It's done. Confirmed." Then he drove in the opposite direction, toward a clinic 2 counties over where no one asked questions, where he could buy time to figure out what came next. In the rearview mirror, Jeanette's eyes were still open, watching him. "What's your name?" she whispered. Marcus swallowed hard. "Nobody you'll remember." But she would. They both would. The clinic didn't have the equipment. Marcus knew it the moment the nurse's face went pale. Jeanelle's lips were turning blue, her breathing shallow and irregular. Jeanette was barely conscious, slumped against the examination table. "They need a real hospital," the nurse said, already reaching for the phone. Marcus grabbed her wrist. "No official records, no names." She stared at him. They're dying. Then save them without paperwork. The nurse hesitated, then nodded toward the back office. There's a doctor who runs a mobile unit for undocumented patients. He's expensive, and he doesn't ask questions, but these girls need more than he can offer. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for 18 years. He called in every favor he had, contacted a physician who'd lost his license but kept his skills, and paid triple rate for a private room in a facility that existed somewhere between legal and invisible. The twins spent 4 days in cardiac crisis. Marcus sat outside their room, watching the door, watching his phone, waiting for Robert Anderson's people to realize the job wasn't finished. On the 5th day, the doctor pulled him aside. They'll live, but they need ongoing treatment, medication, monitoring, possibly surgery within the year. You're looking at hundreds of thousands in medical care. Marcus felt the walls closing in. He couldn't use his real name, couldn't access insurance, couldn't risk any documentation that might alert Robert to 2 girls matching his daughter's description. "What are their names?" a hospital administrator asked, clipboard ready. Marcus looked through the window at the twins sleeping side by side, still wearing the tattered red cardigans a nurse had washed, and returned to them. "Maya," he said, pointing to Jeanette, "and Morgan Webb. They're my nieces. Parents died in a car accident." The lie came easier than it should have. The administrator wrote it down, and just like that, Jeanette and Jeanelle Anderson ceased to exist. Marcus forged the documents himself over the next 3 weeks. Birth certificates with altered dates, school records transferred from a district that had recently flooded, conveniently losing most of its files, a custody arrangement naming him temporary guardian. The twins didn't speak for the first 2 weeks. When Jeanette finally did, her voice was small and broken. "When is Daddy coming back?" Marcus knelt beside her bed. He should tell her the truth, that her father had paid to have them killed, that going back meant dying for real. But she was 6 years old, and her heart was barely holding together. "He's not," Marcus said quietly, "but you're safe now." Jeanelle turned to face the wall. Marcus moved them 4 times in 6 months, always cash rentals, always new cities, always watching over his shoulder. He worked under-the-table jobs, spent everything on medication and clinic visits, taught the twins to answer to Maya and Morgan, to never mention their real names, to forget they'd ever been someone else. At night, he lay awake wondering if Robert Anderson was searching for proof, if someone had seen the girls at the clinic, if the forged papers would hold up under scrutiny. The twins noticed his fear. They learned to hide, too, to disappear into new schools without making friends, to keep their heads down, to survive in the margins. And somewhere, deep in their changing hearts, a different kind of sickness took root. The knowledge that their father had thrown them away, and the man who'd been sent to finish the job was the only reason they were still breathing. Marcus learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. Ramen 3 nights a week, thrift store clothes sorted by price, not size. The twins shared a bedroom in whatever apartment had the cheapest rent, sleeping on a mattress Marcus found on the curb and sanitized with bleach and prayers. The medication was the killer. 2 prescriptions, twice daily, non-negotiable. Beta blockers to slow their racing hearts. ACE inhibitors to reduce the strain. $300 a month at the cheapest pharmacy Marcus could find, and that was with him begging for samples and splitting pills when the doctor wasn't looking. Some months he had to choose Jeanette's prescription or Janelle's, rent or medication, food or the follow-up appointment they desperately needed. Jeanette was 12 the first time she found Marcus sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay. She didn't say anything. She just started researching scholarships, tutoring programs, anything that might reduce the weight crushing them. Jeanelle's approach was different. She got a paper route at 13, lied about her age to work at a diner at 14, learned to pocket tips and skim just enough from the register that no one noticed. She brought home cash in crumpled bills and handed it to Marcus without explanation. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "Does it matter?" It did, but Marcus took it anyway. He always took it. By 15, the twins had diverged completely. Jeanette was all discipline and planning, straight A's, color-coded calendars, 5-year projections scribbled in notebooks she hid under her mattress. She studied late into the night, calculating the exact GPA she'd need for a full scholarship. The precise path that would lift them out of poverty. Jeanelle was pure survival instinct. She fought a girl who called them charity cases and didn't stop until the principal pulled her off. She learned to shoplift medication when Marcus's paychecks ran short. She took risks Jeanette wouldn't touch, crossing lines that kept them alive but cost something harder to measure. They fought constantly. Jeanette wanted to do things the right way. Jeanelle wanted to do whatever worked. "You're going to get us caught," Jeanette hissed, after finding stolen pill bottles in Jeanelle's backpack. "You're going to get us killed waiting for permission," Jeanelle shot back. But when Jeanette collapsed during gym class, heart stuttering, unable to breathe, Jeanelle was the one who carried her to the nurse's office and lied smoothly about a pre-existing condition they were managing with a specialist. And when Jeanelle came home with bruised knuckles and a black eye from a fight she'd started just to feel something other than helpless, Jeanette was the one who cleaned her wounds and said nothing about the anger they both carried. Marcus watched them grow into sharp, guarded young women who trusted no one and expected nothing. Jeanette built walls with plans and control. Jeanelle built them with fists and fury. Neither of them talked about the man in the suit anymore. Neither mentioned the mountain or the red cardigans Marcus had saved, folded carefully in a box at the back of his closet. But on the nights when medication ran out and their hearts raced too fast, when poverty pressed down so hard they couldn't breathe, the twins lay awake in their shared room and remembered exactly who had put them there. And slowly, separately, they began to imagine what it would take to make him pay. Jeanette was studying for her college entrance exams at the library when the television above the reference desk caught her attention. She normally tuned out the news. It was always the same recycled stories about people whose problems had nothing to do with her survival. But the face on the screen stopped her cold. Robert Anderson stood behind a podium draped with a banner reading, "Children's Health Tomorrow Foundation." He was older, grayer at the temples, but the suit was the same quality, the same perfect fit. His smile was warm and practiced as he accepted an oversized check from a panel of philanthropists. Jeanette's pen fell from her hand. "Dedicated his life to ensuring no child suffers from inadequate cardiac care," the reporter was saying. "The foundation, established 15 years ago following a personal tragedy, has raised over $2 billion and provided treatment to more than 50,000 children." The camera cut to a photo. 2 little girls in matching dresses, faces blurred just enough to seem respectful. In loving memory scrolled across the bottom. Jeanette's vision tunneled. Her heart started racing, the old familiar panic she'd learned to control with breathing exercises and medication. But this time, the pills couldn't touch it. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and texted Jeanelle, "Turn on Channel 7, now." 3 miles away, Jeanelle was cleaning tables at the diner when her phone buzzed. She wiped her hands and switched on the small TV mounted above the counter. Robert Anderson was shaking hands with the governor, talking about his commitment to children's health care, his voice steady and sincere. Behind him, a presentation cycled through images of sick children receiving treatment, families weeping with gratitude, state-of-the-art medical facilities funded by his foundation. "My daughters didn't survive," Robert said, his voice catching just enough to seem genuine. "But I've made it my mission to ensure their memory saves lives." Jeanelle's grip tightened on the dish rag in her hand. A plate slipped from the counter and shattered against the floor. She didn't move to clean it. The reporter continued, "Anderson's foundation focuses specifically on children from low-income families who can't afford critical cardiac care, the very situation that claimed his own daughters' lives." The camera zoomed in on Robert's face. He looked directly into the lens, eyes glistening with practiced emotion. No parent should have to choose between saving their child and financial ruin. Jeanelle felt something crack open inside her chest, something she'd kept locked down for years. It wasn't grief, it was rage. An hour later, the twins sat across from each other in Marcus's cramped apartment, laptop open between them, watching the clip replay over and over. "He built an empire on killing us," Jeanelle said, her voice flat and cold. Jeanette was already typing, pulling up tax records, foundation documents, news archives. "The foundation launched the same year we disappeared. He collected $4 million from our life insurance policies and turned it into $2 billion. Jeanelle leaned back, eyes fixed on Robert's frozen face on the screen. "While we were stealing medication just to stay alive." Marcus stood in the doorway, watching them. "You need to let this go. If he finds out you're alive—" "He won't," Jeanette interrupted, her fingers flying across the keyboard, "because we're not Jeanette and Jeanelle Anderson anymore. We're ghosts, and ghosts can get close to people who think they're untouchable." Jeanelle smiled, sharp and humorless. "How close?" Jeanette pulled up Anderson Global's career page, scrolling through internship listings and entry-level positions. Close enough to stand in the same room, close enough to make him look us in the eye. On screen, Robert Anderson smiled for the cameras, accepting applause for saving children he claimed to love. The twins watched him, and for the first time in 18 years, they had the same thought at the same moment. He was going to pay for every single day they'd suffered, and he was going to do it in front of the same people who called him a saint. Jeanette had always been good with details. It was how she survived, tracking medication schedules, scholarship deadlines, the exact day rent was due. But now, those skills had a new target. She started with the public records. Death certificates were supposed to be filed within 72 hours of death. She requested copies under the Freedom of Information Act. Using a fake research credential she'd created for a non-existent graduate thesis on a child mortality rates. The certificates arrived 3 weeks later. Date of death, November 14th. Location, Summit County Medical Examiner. Cause, congenital heart failure. Complications from congenital cardiomyopathy. Jeanette cross-referenced the date with hospital intake records from the clinic where Marcus had taken them. They'd been admitted on November 16th, 2 days after they were legally declared dead. She showed Jeanelle the documents, fingers trembling. "We were already dead when Marcus saved us." Jeanelle stared at the papers. "He filed before we even stopped breathing." The insurance payout was harder to trace, buried in corporate filings and estate documents. But Jeanette was patient. She worked her way through financial disclosures, following the money from Anderson Personal Holdings to a series of shell companies, then into the foundation's seed funding, $4 million. Transferred on November 18th, 4 days after the twins were declared dead while they were still fighting for their lives in an unlicensed clinic 2 states away. But it was Jeanelle who found the real proof. She'd learned to navigate the dark web during her years of stealing and surviving, knew how to find things people wanted to keep hidden. She hired a hacker for $200 paid in cryptocurrency and gave them one target, Robert Anderson's private email server. The response came back in 72 hours, a folder full of messages, time-stamped and damning. November 13th, 11:47 p.m. The situation needs to be resolved by Friday, cleanly. I'll handle the paperwork from my end. November 14th, 8:23 a.m. Death certificates ready for filing, awaiting confirmation. November 14th, 6:15 p.m. Policy claims submitted. No complications expected. And then, the one that made Jeanette's hands shake so badly she almost dropped the laptop. November 15th, 9:02 a.m. from Robert Anderson to his attorney. Confirm the children are no longer a financial liability. Proceed with foundation establishment as discussed. Jeanelle read over her shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. He knew exactly what he was doing. They printed everything. Jeanette organized the documents into a timeline, cross-referencing emails with financial transfers, death certificates with insurance payouts. She built a case file that proved beyond doubt that Robert Anderson hadn't made a desperate choice in a moment of weakness. He'd planned their murder, filed the paperwork before they were dead, collected the money while they were gasping for air in a mountain forest, and then he'd built a charity empire on the fiction of his grief. Marcus found them at 3 a.m, surrounded by printed documents, laptop screens glowing in the dark. "What are you doing?" Jeanette looked up, eyes red from hours of staring at evidence, proving he meant it, every second of it. Jeanelle held up the email thread. "He didn't abandon us because he was desperate. He erased us because we were expensive, and dead kids are worth more than sick ones." Marcus reached for the papers, but Jeanette pulled them back. "We're not hiding any more. We're not Maya and Morgan. We're the daughters he murdered on paper, and we're going to show the world exactly who their charity saint really is." On the table between them, 2 death certificates lay side by side. Jeanette and Jeanelle Anderson, deceased, buried, gone. Except they weren't. And now they had proof that the man who'd killed them was still walking free, still profiting, still smiling for cameras, while 50,000 families thanked him for the mercy he'd never shown his own children. The hunt was no longer theoretical. It had a timeline, a target, and an ending Robert Anderson would never see coming. They divided the work the way they'd divided everything since childhood. Jeanette took the long game. Jeanelle took the risks. Jeanette applied to Anderson Global under her legal name, Maya Webb. Bachelor's degree in finance, flawless GPA, internship experience, fabricated just carefully enough to pass background checks. She interviewed for a junior analyst position in the corporate strategy division, 3 floors below Robert Anderson's executive suite. She got the job in 2 weeks. Her first day, she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor and walked past her father's office. He was on the phone, laughing, gesturing with one hand. He didn't look up, didn't see the young woman with his dead daughter's eyes standing 15 feet away. Jeanette kept walking. She had time. She worked 60-hour weeks, stayed late, volunteered for projects no one else wanted. She learned the company's structure, memorized the names of every executive assistant, every board member, every person with access to Robert's calendar and confidences. She became invisible in the way competent, quiet employees always are, essential but forgettable. Within 6 months, She was handling preliminary research for board presentations. Within a year, she was in meetings where Robert's strategy team discussed acquisitions, legal vulnerabilities, and reputation management. She never spoke to him directly, not yet. Meanwhile, Jeanelle was doing the work that could send her to prison. She tracked down Marcus's old contacts, the people who'd helped hide them 18 years ago. Some were dead, some refused to talk, but a few were willing to go on record, especially when Jeanelle showed them the email thread proving Robert had planned the whole thing. She found the clinic director who'd treated them without paperwork, now retired, bitter, and willing to testify about the two girls brought in by a terrified man who paid cash and begged for no records. She located the medical examiner who'd signed the death certificates. He was still in Summit County, still filing paperwork, and when Jeanelle showed him the proof that the girls he declared dead were alive, his face went pale. "He told me it was a formality," he whispered, "that they died at home and just needed official documentation." "You signed without seeing bodies?" Jeanelle said, voice cold. The examiner nodded, hands shaking. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." But the hardest piece was finding the one person who could end Robert with a single statement, Marcus's contact, the man who'd paid him to finish the job. It took Jeanelle 4 months of digging through Marcus's old records, tracking phone numbers and shell accounts before she found him. Vincent Cross, now operating a legitimate security firm in Colorado, desperate to leave his past buried. Jeanelle showed up at his office unannounced. She didn't threaten him. She just laid out the evidence, the emails, the death certificates, the insurance fraud, and watched him realize that his silence made him complicit in attempted murder. "You give us a recorded statement," Jeanelle said, "or we give the police enough evidence to charge you as an accessory." Vincent stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone and started talking. Back in the city, Jeanette was building her own weapon. She'd gained access to Robert's digital files, copying everything to an encrypted drive, financial irregularities, foundation mismanagement, offshore accounts that didn't match the public narrative. Nothing catastrophic on its own, but combined with the murder plot, it painted a picture of a man who'd built his empire on fraud, theft, and his daughter's corpses. The twins met every Sunday in a coffee shop halfway between their worlds. Jeanette brought corporate intel. Jeanelle brought witness statements and legal strategies. "We have enough to bury him in court," Jeanelle said, sliding a folder across the table. Jeanette shook her head. "Court takes years. Appeals, delays, settlements. He'll use his money to make it disappear." "Then what's the play?" Jeanette pulled out an invitation she'd copied from Robert's calendar. Anderson Global Leadership Retreat. 3 days in the mountains, limited press access, board members and top executives only. "It's in 6 weeks." Jeanelle's eyes narrowed. "Where in the mountains?" "Summit County, same region where he left us." The sisters looked at each other across the table, and for the first time in 18 years, they smiled the same smile. "We take him back," Jeanette said quietly. "We make him stand in that clearing, in front of everyone who thinks he's a saint, and we show them exactly what he did." Jeanelle leaned back. "And if he runs?" "He won't." Jeanette's voice was ice because he doesn't know we exist. "And by the time he realizes, it'll be too late." The Anderson Global Leadership Retreat was exactly what Jeanette expected. Corporate team building disguised as wilderness adventure, with catered meals and luxury cabins that defeated the entire purpose of Roughing It. 30 executives, 5 board members, and Robert Anderson himself, all gathered to discuss quarterly projections while pretending to commune with nature. Jeanette had volunteered to coordinate logistics. No one questioned the junior analyst, eager to prove herself. Jeanelle arrived separately, posing as a freelance videographer hired to document the retreat for promotional materials. She had cameras, release forms, and a smile that made people forget to check her credentials too carefully. The twins didn't acknowledge each other, not when they passed in the lodge, not during the welcome dinner, not when Robert stood at the front of the room and talked about leadership, legacy, and the foundation that made him beloved by millions. On the second day, Jeanette proposed an optional morning hike, a scenic trail that offered stunning views and photo opportunities. She'd scouted the route personally, she explained. It was moderate difficulty, perfectly safe, and would give the executives a chance to discuss strategy in a more relaxed setting. 12 people signed up. Robert was one of them. They set out at dawn, Jeanette leading, Jeanelle trailing at the back with her camera. The group chatted easily, complaining about the incline, joking about their lack of cardio. Robert walked near the front, expensively dressed in hiking gear that had never seen actual wilderness. Jeanette guided them deeper into the forest, away from the marked trails, following a path she'd memorized from satellite images and Marcus's old directions. The executives didn't notice. They were too busy networking. An hour in, Jeanette stopped in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. The morning light filtered through the branches exactly the way it had 18 years ago. The ground was covered in pine needles and fallen leaves. "This is the spot I wanted to show you," Jeanette said, her voice steady. "Perfect for a group photo. Jeanelle, can you set up?" Jeanelle moved efficiently, positioning people, adjusting angles. She made sure Robert stood in the center, surrounded by his executives and board members. She made sure everyone had their phones out, ready to capture the moment. Then she nodded to Jeanette. Jeanette reached into her backpack and pulled out 2 red cardigans, worn, faded, stained with 18-year-old dirt. She held them up, and the clearing went silent. Robert's face drained of color. "Do you recognize these?" Jeanette asked, her voice carrying across the quiet forest. One of the board members laughed nervously. "Is this part of the retreat? Some kind of trust exercise?" Jeanette ignored him, eyes locked on Robert. "November 14th. You drove 2 little girls to this exact spot. You walked away and left them to die." Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jeanelle stepped forward, still recording. "You filed their death certificates before they stopped breathing, collected $4 million in insurance money 4 days later, built your foundation on the lie that you loved them." "What is this?" one of the executives demanded, looking between the twins and Robert. "Anderson, what are they talking about?" Robert found his voice, smooth and practiced. "I don't know these women. This is some kind of sick prank." "We're not women," Jeanette said, stepping closer. "We're your daughters. Jeanette and Jeanelle Anderson, the ones you murdered on paper." The clearing erupted, executives shouting questions, board members reaching for phones, Robert backing away with his hands raised. Jeanelle pulled out a tablet, voice cutting through the chaos. "We have the emails. Death certificates filed while we were alive. Insurance fraud. Witness statements from the man you paid to make sure we never came home." She played the audio. Vincent Cross's voice, recorded and clear. "Robert Anderson hired me to ensure his daughters didn't survive. He paid $15,000. I was supposed to make it look like they died from their heart conditions." Someone gasped. A phone camera flashed. Robert lunged for the tablet, but Jeanette blocked him. "Don't!" Her voice was cold, controlled. "There are 20 copies, 12 people watching, 4 cameras recording. You can't bury this." Robert's perfect composure shattered. "You were supposed to be dead. You were," he said. "He saved us instead," Jeanelle said. "While you cashed the check, Jeanette held up the red cardigans, turning slowly so every phone, every camera, every witness could see. "We crawled after you, right here. We screamed for you, and you kept walking." Robert sank to his knees, the same ground where his daughters had collapsed 18 years ago. His face was in his hands, shoulders shaking. But whether it was remorse or fear, no one could tell. One of the board members was already on the phone with someone, police, lawyers, crisis management. Another was filming, live streaming to somewhere. The containment Robert had spent billions building crumbled in real time. Jeanette knelt down to his level, voice low enough that only he could hear. 50,000 families thanked you for saving their children. Now the world gets to know what you did to yours. She stood, leaving him there in the dirt, surrounded by the people who'd protected his image and now bore witness to his ruin. Jeanelle stopped recording. She met her sister's eyes across the clearing, and after 18 years of hiding, running, and surviving, they finally let themselves be seen. The police arrived within an hour. Sirens cut through the mountain quiet, followed by unmarked vehicles carrying detectives who'd been briefed on the way. By then, the clearing had become a crime scene, and Robert Anderson sat on the ground with his hands pressed against his face, no longer trying to explain. The executives stood in clusters, phones out, frantically calling attorneys and PR teams. The board members had already distanced themselves physically, backing toward the trail as though proximity to Robert might contaminate them by association. Detective Sarah Chen approached the twins first. She'd reviewed the evidence package Jeanelle had sent 3 days earlier, timed to arrive only after the confrontation, insurance against Robert making them disappear again. "We need your statements," Chen said, her voice professional but gentle. "Both of you." Jeanette handed over a USB drive. "Everything's documented. Emails, financial records, witness statements, medical records, proving we were alive when he declared us dead." Jeanelle added the tablet with Vincent Cross's confession. "He's already agreed to testify. So has the medical examiner who signed fraudulent death certificates." Chen nodded, then turned to Robert. "Mr. Anderson, I need you to stand." Robert didn't move. One of the executives, his COO for the past decade, stepped forward. "He should have legal representation before—" "He can call his lawyer from the station," Chen interrupted. She gestured to her partner, who helped Robert to his feet and read him his rights in a flat, practiced tone. Robert looked at his daughters as the handcuffs clicked into place. His mouth opened, words forming and dying before they reached sound. Finally he managed, "I thought I was making a rational choice." Jeanette's expression didn't change. "You thought we were expensive. You were dying anyway." "We're still here," Jeanelle said, her voice sharp. 18 years later, still breathing. "How rational was it?" Robert had no answer. The officers led him toward the trail, and the executives parted like a curtain, none of them meeting his eyes. The fallout moved faster than wildfire. By the time the police caravan reached the main road, the first headlines were already breaking. Board members resigned before they could be pushed. The Children's Health Tomorrow Foundation suspended operations pending investigation. Every family the foundation had helped, every donation Robert had accepted, every award ceremony and press conference, all of it replayed on 24-hour news cycles with new context that transformed charity into blood money. The twins became unavoidable. News outlets called them survivors, heroes, victims, labels that never quite fit. Jeanette declined most interviews, but Jeanelle gave just one, to a primetime investigative show. "What do you want people to know?" the journalist asked. Jeanelle looked directly into the camera. "That we didn't survive to destroy him. We survived because someone chose mercy when our father chose murder. And now we're choosing what happens to the money he built on our graves. The legal process took 14 months. Robert's attorneys tried everything: procedural delays, character witnesses, arguments that the evidence was illegally obtained. But the paper trail was irrefutable, and Vincent Cross's testimony devastated any remaining defense. The jury took 4 hours to convict on all counts: attempted murder, insurance fraud, child endangerment, and a half-dozen financial crimes uncovered during the investigation. Robert Anderson was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 20. The foundation's assets, $3.2 billion, were frozen during the trial. When the ruling came down, Jeanette and Jeanelle had a choice: claim it as restitution or redirect it. They chose the third option. They established a new foundation, independently audited and transparently managed. Every dollar went to families navigating medical poverty, the medication costs, the impossible choices, the desperate math Robert had used to justify murder. But this time, there were no photo ops, no galas, no billionaire savior narrative, just help, quiet, direct, and accountable. Marcus attended the foundation's first board meeting, still uncomfortable in formal spaces, still looking over his shoulder. Jeanette put him on the advisory board. Jeanelle made sure his own medical debt, accumulated from 18 years of keeping them alive, was cleared entirely. "You didn't have to do that," Marcus said, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to save us," Jeanette replied. "But you did." On the anniversary of the clearing confrontation, the twins hiked back to the spot alone. They didn't bring cameras or witnesses. They brought the red cardigans, faded and worn, and burned them in a small, controlled fire. Jeanelle watched the fabric curl and blacken. "Do you think he understands now?" "No," Jeanette said quietly. "Men like him never do. They just understand consequences." They stood in silence as the smoke rose through the pine trees, carrying away the last physical evidence of the children they'd been forced to stop being. Somewhere in a federal prison, Robert Anderson was learning what it meant to be powerless, erased, and forgotten. His empire was dismantled, his reputation destroyed, his name synonymous with the worst kind of betrayal. But Jeanette and Jeanelle Anderson, now legally restored to their real names, weren't defined by his destruction. They'd survived not for revenge, but for proof that mercy could outlast cruelty, that two girls left to die could choose to save others instead of becoming the monster who tried to erase them. They walked back down the trail together, the mountain quiet around them, no longer running from the past or hunting it, just finally, impossibly free